Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Looking Deeper with Dana King Francisco and Sandra Herrick. Welcome to the show tonight. Hey, Sandy.
Hey Dana, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm glad that we missed last week so that we're here this week. Happy
Yeah.
birthday, Todd.
Exactly. The timing was perfect as always.
So what's going on, Dana?
Well, I think a whole lot is going on. A lot of conversations out there about women and women's rights and women's autonomy and looking deeper into it and looking deeper into our own personal feelings about the matters and our own personal experiences with it, thoughts, challenges, and going deep. So here we are.
Here we are. And I want to thank everybody for who listens to us to be the caliber of person that wants to have these conversations or is willing at least to listen and interact with these conversations. And to know that tonight is really going to be dedicated and focused on the feralness of the feminine. And Dana and I had a conversation about what tonight would be about. And because of what is happening over Roe versus Wade, it is a vibrational challenge to all females that over the past 50 years, literally 50 years, who, even though politically or religiously have said that they wouldn't or don't support having abortions, possibly have had or supported their children or their husbands had lovers or they've taken care of other women. I mean, if there's anything we're going to talk about is the reality of the fact that sex creates children, and sometimes these children do not find their way or have a way to enter into a long-term life. And what's the feralness of any of us when we conceive? Through love or through hardship? Let's talk about it, Dana.
Wow, let's go there. Well, it's interesting. You know, you and I always, since we've known each other, had great conversations about a whole lot of things.
A whole lot of things.
A whole lot
On the
of
dark
things.
side of the moon.
Exactly. And there are a couple of things that really always keep things interesting. And that is that there's an age difference between us. And maybe some philosophical differences based on our life experience. But you and I have always agreed that my experience, your experience, are real experiences. And it's not up to anyone to negate an experience being real or being less than. And I think that's part of our wonderful friendship. Number one is that we have always agreed on that. And sometimes having to pause for a moment and say, well, let me think about that.
Exactly. And, you know, today we sit in this rumbling, so that we qualify it. I'm 74 years old. And so I am a product of before legal abortion and experiencing the incredible privilege of having abortion. And to be a woman that knows, because I had an abortion before it was legal, it is important to be able to say to anybody out there that is now in the tremor of this, and this is not religious. I really want everybody to hear this. I am not saying that anybody who is defending it or opposing it is on or off course. You're on your own soapbox. We're doing your own thing. I'm speaking about generations and generations and generations of women that had the life of their bellies and their children in their hands for centuries, through herbs, through hardship, through the reality that men were not really involved. Women birthed babies. Women had babies with other women around. Men were sent away. And to have a woman understand that another child, they had no food for it or space for it or even the energy because the man was not there or there was no space to survive, that they had the kinship of other women to go to and say, this has to stop. And it was just done. It was done without shame. It was done without blame. It was a knowing. It doesn't mean that it wasn't loved or the decision wasn't made with great thought or regret. Then there are those that had the babies, and this is for this side of the conversation with Dana, that there's no man that will claim it or family that really wants it. And so it's offered up for adoption. It's given a full life, but not in the hands of its creator, of its parents. What do you want to say about that, Dana?
Well, that's probably a whole show in and of itself, as you and I talked about, but there's a lot of truth about that. And conversations now are being had by those of us who are adoptees, who are getting really loud about the fact that there are a lot of reasons why women give their children up for adoption. Most of it has to do with socioeconomic circumstances. And there are lots of reasons why men and women want to have or adopt a child. Right. And there are also undercurrents that go along in the underbelly of adoption.
Exactly.
The sex trade, rehoming. And so this idea of this, celebrating, I've always had this thing, and my opinions and thoughts about these things are not always the most popular. So I will preface that. I do not drink what I call the adoptee Kool-Aid. And I understand that a lot of people celebrate the fact that a child, oh, look at it's being put up for adoption. Isn't that wonderful? It's going to find the perfect home and it's going to have the perfect life. And I've always felt tremendous sadness when I've heard the words, isn't that wonderful? She's putting her child up for adoption. She's doing the right thing. I don't find anything to celebrate in that. I find immense sadness in any child's circumstances at the moment or the time of separation from its mother. And so I don't have this glorified notion that children are being adopted and whisked away into these magnificent places of being and nurturing, simply because, the fact is that the first people who adopted me decided that I wasn't who they perceived me to be. The experience wasn't what they thought it was going to be. And I suffered at the hands of a woman who beat me, according to my dad, the Sarge, nearly every day as a toddler. And there's no celebration in the fact then that I was rehomed. No different than, hey, you know what, that dog really isn't working out. Let's find another place for it to go and live. And these things actually happen. There are groups on Facebook for rehoming children, and there are no laws that surround the transaction in the United States.
Even the children that are refugees that are being adopted because I'll be a kind person, I'll bring somebody in from another country. Mm-hmm. If the culture does not resonate, if the DNA doesn't resonate, the psychological wear and tear on the child, the DNA isn't bonded. And this does not dismiss Anybody that has adopted a child that
Absolutely.
has a loving, wonderful, safe home, that is there also.
Yes,
But we need to
absolutely.
talk about that there's the light in the dark in everything. There's a light in the dark of an abortion. There's the light in the dark of bringing full term. And to be honest, even when you have a child and you have a father and you have a family, one of the things that I knew way back when was that's no guarantee you're going to like your kid or your kid's going to like you or you'll get along.
Exactly. That's
Life,
all true.
Exactly. Life is imagined, hoped for, and then it has to be lived. And we don't always know how to live life because of the confusion of our imagination or our dream or our impulses. And it's this Roe versus Wade dilemma that we are in right now. I want to be able to say that it gave the graciousness of option beyond adoption. So that if one really wanted to give birth and have the experience and trust the child's life into the hands of others, that was there longer than there's nothing inside me. And that is why I had my abortion. There was nothing inside me that allowed me to feel that these children would be safe from the violence that perpetuated in my family. And not one of the fathers that I conceived by accepted the responsibility of the child. So there was no, oh, I'm pregnant. It was, oh, God, I'm pregnant.
Mm.
The first one, I had an illegal abortion by a very sophisticated doctor because my parents had the means, and my mother took charge when I told her. My mother went feral and said, let me see if there's something I can do. But before I spoke to her about it, this is in 1960, I was 19, so whatever year, 67, 66. I was willing to go to Tijuana because that's where it was, and knew that I was risking my life, but something in my feralness, and this is when, I don't know if it's called disassociation or concrete information that won't allow me to go into fantasy about it'll all be okay. It was, I know I'm risking myself, but I know I will not have this child. It's amazing what we do when we know we have to do it. One of the things in this discussion, and I think it's for both sides of the coin, is when somebody says, oh, well, I would never, or I will. If there's anything about the truth of pregnancy is nobody knows what they will do until they end in the reality of being. If you think you're going to do something, it's an idea and it's a belief system, and maybe someone told you that's the way to do it, and they groomed you into that thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I know people that have said they would never, ever, 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 and they were righteous about it. No abortion, no this, no that. And I said, okay, call me when you are pregnant and I will support you. It never happened, never, no. And when the phone call came, it was, okay, we'll do what you need to do. And so it's shocking to know that we do confront what we have to confront only in the moment we're cornered or in the reality of a situation. And that's when we go feral. That's when whatever we're going to do has to come from a deeper knowing, even if we're confused inside ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go feral, there's a different consciousness. Outside information doesn't always count. That's when we run or fight. And it's fight or flight. It's run to where we're safe or be quiet so that we stay safe. We have to figure something out. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It makes absolute sense. Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I have a whole lot of feels about that. And it's interesting when we take a look at our experiences in life and the way that they shape our ferocity. I'm very ferocious when it comes to children. I mean, as you know,
Yes.
you've been to the children's home on the reservation.
Yes,
And
yes,
so, Mama Bear, we're all the Mama Bears, right? When we go in there. And the ferocity for me as an adopted person is in the place of saying to an adoptive parent, and yeah, I mean, some people just have astonishing households that they grow up in. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. But what I am saying is that if you are listening to me right now and you're thinking to yourself, I would really like to adopt a child, ask yourself why. Is it because it's expected in your family? Is it society's expectation? Is it a longing, something you feel will complete you? Why
right.
do you want to have the child? And understand that if you adopt a child, that child will wonder one day at some point, who are my people?
Right.
The idea of, or the thoughts and feelings of not feeling comfortable or that you fit in, those are real. And the drinking the Kool-Aid for an adopted person is, well, you just need to be grateful. Aren't you glad your mother didn't abort you? Because if that would have happened, you wouldn't have a life. So you just need to be grateful for no matter what, right? I always think of Harry Potter under the cupboard or under the stairs, right?
Right.
And so I say to potential adoptive parents, you need to realize the reality is there is no more anonymity in the world. We have the ability, thanks to 23andMe and Ancestry, to find out who our biological family is, who the sperm donor was.
And that's only recent.
That's only recent. So there is no anonymity. And at some point, your child will perhaps reach out, spit into a bottle, send it off, and connect with their biological family. And adoptive parents need to be prepared for that.
Right.
And realistically, be prepared for that. I, being a child of the 60s, right now, as you know, I am working diligently with the state of Georgia and an attorney in Atlanta to have all of my adoption, my life history opened. It is not available to me. It is not available to people in Michigan. There are certain states that allow you to open up your birth papers or death papers, depending on the circumstances surrounding your beginning. So adoptive parents need to be really real about the fact that they are bringing into their home a child who has been traumatized by separation at birth.
Could I ask you to be able to explain, as a child separated at birth and being a seeker of light and doing healing and energy work and all that, one of the things that I was told, and I believe it's true because of something so deep inside me, is my mother literally said, out of 7 children, I'm the one that was wanted.
Mm.
She got pregnant the first night of her wedding with my sister. They got married. She got pregnant. My father went back to the war, World War II. He came home. The war was over. Love, peace. Everything was beautiful. And I was the wanted child in the scenario of we're safe, make a home, love, and grow. The other 5 were broken condoms, or the douche didn't work, or, oops, we did it again. And So I have a sense in me of truly wanting to be wanted. The DNA in me, in my psyche and soul, has that foundation, and it was re-imprinted on me. You are describing something that really is a visceralness in your own DNA psyche, or the base of your emotional intelligence, that you're now being validated for what you've always felt.
Yes.
Please describe what that is like to live with.
Well, it's a longing for connection. And it's a longing for connection that is visceral, in the blood and in the bones. And it's not to negate adoptive families whatsoever. It is to acknowledge that the blood and the bones within us understand the smells and the sounds and the touch of our mothers and our fathers too, of course. I mean, the men count, but
the pheromones, absolutely.
Yes. And so there's a searching. I think, we're always searching anyway in a given lifetime. We're searching for something, all of us. But there's always a search and always so many questions. But the separation and reseparating, I always say I've had more parents than most people. And even, in meeting my biological family for the first time, seeing their faces and the familiarity and touching their skin, there's remembrance in that. And when you're denied that and you're told, you don't need to know that. And worse than that, at least in us children of the 60s and 70s, we were told lies about who our people are or were. So you grow up with a confusion, you grow up with a lot of shame about the fact that your mother could not take care of you. She was too young, she was a whore, all different sorts of things.
Were you told those things? Or
yes.
Really?
Yes. I was told that my mother was practically a child, which was not the truth. So many things, between me and my brother, who eventually found his birth parents and has a relationship with them. We were told tremendous things that were not correct. And so your psyche from a very young age is imprinted with loss, with longing, with yearning, with why me. And on top of that, if you are given false information for whatever reason it is given, it's a mind game, it's a heart game, it's a soul game that can take lifetimes to work through, to heal through. And again, that's not to say that just because everybody is born into a birth family, that doesn't mean that, families of origin also have their problems. That is for certain. But for this topic of conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the daydream, I mean, even in my knowing I was wanted, but I also lived in a very violent family, I daydreamed about what it would be like to be someplace else. Or if I had a different father, or if I wasn't his child. I looked so much like my father that as a child, in all of my grade school years, I would walk in and they say, "Oh, you're Britt Herrick's daughter." So I couldn't get in trouble without getting known. But again, I didn't have an autonomy beyond my father's image. And therefore, I got labeled because of his history or his reputation. And how did you fantasize about your identity?
Well, the fantasy was actually because I am spiritually plugged in, let's just say. The fantasy was that as a child, the visitations that I had as a seer, as a sensitive, told me who I was, but it was always denied. That's not who you are. I've told you who you are. That is who you are. And so whatever you're thinking or feeling or experiencing, that is not valid. Only to find out, years and decades later that exactly what I was experiencing was my ancestors letting me know exactly who I was and why I was. I understand that there are higher reasons for our journey. I get that, and our soul has a purpose here. It does. And I get all of that. I understand the metaphysics of living. But we're also living a human life and a human experience with all of the attachments, experiences of being a human being. And to live in a fantasy that bad things don't happen with regard to sex, with regard to rape, with regard to molestation, all of those kind of things. I think we're all getting a wake-up call, especially because we as women are the bearers of children. And I fault no woman who, I am a very much a pro-choice woman. It is not up to me to tell anybody what they should or should not do in their circumstance. And I never fault a woman who finds herself in a circumstance where she, gives her child up for adoption, ever. But if that's going to happen, let's be realistic about what the ramifications are, what that means, other than here, you take it, and I know it's going to be going to a good home. It doesn't end there. And I would venture to say, I've not ever had an abortion. I have met women who have, you included. I've known many women. I know many women. And the moment that happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sandy, it's not done the minute you leave the doctor's door or the abortionist's door. There are things that happen afterward in your heart, in your psyche, in your questioning. Am I correct?
It is a topic of personal ability to experience the reality that this physiological moment of conception, whether it's through casual sex, lovemaking, violence, rape, once you're imprinted with that conception, there is a feeling about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that personal feeling is so intimate and so private that it takes time to figure out, first and foremost, are you in a loving relationship where a child is even wanted? Are you in a secret relationship where now the child is the sin teller? Are you in a relationship where it was just casual and it didn't matter? Are you a type of person, it doesn't matter who the father is, I'm going to have my baby? Having the abortion for me, it literally, my first abortion, like I said, was before it was legal. And to this day, I can tell you every single detail about it. I can tell you how I felt, why I felt, and the grief I felt about it. And what I need to say to everybody from the honesty of who I am, I had to navigate if I couldn't get the abortion or I backed out at any second before it, that who was going to be my partner, who was going to be its father. The man that got me pregnant was not the man that I wanted to be married to or to be the father, and he was. And I was dating another man at the time who was a kinder man and a gentler man, or a man that was less troubled. And I told him it was his baby. And that's what I mean about us going feral. I was protecting the child even from the person that I conceived it from, because I knew that person was so troubled. And chose somebody that I hoped would make sense of having a safe life with, because it makes me want to cry. It's about safety. Will this be safe? My heart to this day breaks because the man I told was willing to believe it, but I told him I was going to arrange to have the abortion. It broke his heart. And he found out it was not his child by coming to visit me after the fact and reading my diary. And then it really broke his heart. But I tried to explain to him that I chose and lied because in my heart, he was the man I would trust.
Mm.
Why do we do those things? It wasn't because he was going to give me a better life financially, or it was, if I can't protect this baby by actually stopping its life, I have to protect this baby by finding it a life. To this day, to realize that I am capable of thinking like that gives me the reality of when we as women have to figure things out, it doesn't always follow the protocol of somebody else's imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Because not everybody we get pregnant by is who we need to spend our life with or want to spend our life with, or who we get pregnant by is available to spend our life with.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do we do for the child?
Right.
I have had 4 abortions. Anybody that gasps, the first one was literally a broken condom. The second one was a broken condom. The third one was literally because the man I was massively in love with was leaving, and we had made love, and it was protected. We always had protected sex, and he was about to get up and go and take a shower and leave because he was moving to California, and he looked at me in the doorway of the bedroom, and he came back in bed, and he made love to me like we'd never made love, and it was not protected, and I conceived. And the fourth one, when I was interviewed for the abortion, because it was now legal and I didn't have to worry about tell somebody or confess or be shamed, or it was like, okay, we'll go through this and I am sorry. The interviewer was younger than I, and I was only 26 years old. Have you had other abortions? And I said, yes, this is my 4th. And she arrogantly kicked in and said, have you heard of contraception? And I looked at her and I said, the IUD is coming out with the baby, bitch. I was protecting myself the best way I could. And I was pregnant anyhow. So, and women today are putting in all sorts of hormones and not having their periods. And I am angry that the responsibility of the hormone interruption to not conceive is always placed on the woman. A man gets to put on a condom, but a woman has to compromise her body. She has to stop a period or interrupt her hormones, risk pills. The very first time I was given birth control pills, it was illegal, meaning I got them under the counter at a doctor that was selling them to people there. I was 18, so 19. So I was, and yet when I went to my gynecologist after the abortion, and he took the pills and he threw them in the garbage, and I said, "What are you doing? There goes my sex life." And he goes, "How about cerebral hemorrhage?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "You told me you had migraines. This pill has too much estrogen for you. You will bleed out." So I'm also the product of the chemical world that still didn't know how to keep me safe as I was trying to stay safe, not just for me, but for the men, because that was contemporary. If you were on birth control, you could have unprotected sex. I also have to state I'm from a generation that didn't have AIDS or, all these other infections that are available through sex. This generation can't even think about not having protected sex, not besides getting pregnant. So the grief that I carry for losing my children isn't because I was a reckless woman. It's because nobody wanted to claim them, and there was no place to go with 4 children except welfare and a lot of life and have a life end. That was my decision. Anybody can have an opinion about that, but I made peace with that, Dana.
Mm-hmm.
I grieve it. I made peace with my children. I've prayed for them, asked for forgiveness. I've done a lot of work on them. There's a sacredness to each and every one of them. One I consider is profoundly my spirit child, a companion, because of all the metaphysical dynamics we have, because that one really came from making love. It was a bigger energy in my body. It is hard to say that parents regret having children, and unfortunately tell their children.
Mm-hmm.
We know people that say that.
Oh, yes, we do.
It is sad to know that a mother says to a child, I wish I never had you.
Yes.
Or a father says, you're a bitch just like your mother.
Mm-hmm.
The romanticness of each child is birthed into a safe environment. The people that are asking that or demanding that, what are they going to do to keep the child safe? What are the laws that will be directed or found that each and every father will be responsible for the DNA that they share? I mean, in my generation, women had babies and men didn't have to provide the financial. They could just walk out. And women were left and shunned. And then they had a bastard child.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite the same in this age because and I have to say this, there's kind of a political okayness with a woman or a man wanting to have a child. And so they either have it by themselves because they really do want it and the family kind of hones in, or you can financially provide a life for it. But if anybody got pregnant before 1965 and hippies said, I want my love child, you were shipped out, farmed out, sent away, bartered with, shunned, and labeled.
Mm-hmm.
We're being labeled again. And this is horrific.
Well, and sadly, it's been attached to religion, religious beliefs, religious dogma, sometimes piety. Everybody has their own opinion about everything. And we, as you said, we can all have an opinion about my story or your story or anybody's story. And Lady Hawk, thank you for sharing yours there in the chat room. And at the end of the day, for me, the idea that in some states, even for a woman to have a hysterectomy, she has to have her husband's permission before a doctor will allow her to have a hysterectomy. When my daughter had her tubes tied, she had to have Matthew's permission. Even though, her giving birth to Easton was traumatic for her. for medical reasons, she had to have his permission. As a woman, my ferocity says, but it's my body and I need my tubes tied. I need to have my uterus removed. And why is anyone other than me making that decision for me? And I get really, as a woman, I get very ferocious about that. And actually anything when it comes to the invasion of somebody's body, somebody's privacy. Ask Todd. He's on an airplane between here and Nashville coming up back on business, and he was like, man, I wish I was going to be there to hear this conversation between the two of you, because sometimes I look at him and say, well, I'm not a man hater. And he's like, really? I think right in this moment, what you're saying to me, you kind of are. And I will say, no, it's a patriarchy thing.
Exactly.
It's a patriarchy thing.
What you hate is domination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Get your nose
Whether
out
it's
of...
from the feminine or the masculine.
I don't care.
Because there's some really bad women out there that love to dominate.
Yeah. And until they're the ones who get pregnant and have to make a decision, right?
Exactly. I mean, let me be honest here, because there's that place within my mother who said, you will not shame me in my community.
Wow.
My life now was on display, and her statement is, you will not shame me.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up getting married to the man that I didn't want to marry because I was living with him years later, a couple of years later. He had a car accident, and it got in the city briefs. And all of a sudden, my mother says, come home. And I'm sitting in the chair across from her. And she goes, you will get married. You'll never be allowed back in this house. And it's like, I thought the only reason why you had to get married is if you were pregnant and I've already had the abortion. You will not shame me in my community.
Wow.
I'm a 19-year-old. No, I'm 21 years old now. 21, living in my own apartment, living with a man who just came back from Vietnam. It's 1969, and my mother still had the power to tell me through her control, you will not shame me. You are not allowed back to this family. And my shock was, I can't be in the family because I'm an independent woman? And it got in the city briefs that the guy had a car accident, and that is more traumatic to me in a way of, but you rescued me, now you're throwing me to the lion's den? But it's that kind of whiplash from a woman, from the mother, is so for me, I'm sorry to step on you at this point, but it's like, or interrupt you. The domination from anybody with the authority that can take from you your sense of love, or being loved, or belonging. And that we sacrifice ourselves to belong.
Yes.
That makes me still want to cry.
Yeah.
The betrayal is hysterical. It's breathtaking. The betrayal is breathtaking.
Yes. And Kimberly, you're right. It is also about equality. Absolutely, it's about equality. Yes. Yes, I have some very strong opinions about all of that. As you know, Sandy.
I do, baby.
And about the whole subject of sex in general. I mean, as a quadruple Scorpio, I'm no prude. Let me put it that way. However, when it comes to betrayal through sex, molestation, etc., then my hackles are right up there with you, Kimberly.
It's astounding to know when I was literally 23 years old, I started to go to. No, I apologize. So I was about 26. I was 26 years old when I really started to study metaphysics, and it was like at 25 I got into mind development. At 26 I started to study with spirituality. Mind development is very different than spirituality, and the psychic phenomena of mind development and the spirituality of what is sacred, what is herbs, what is medicine, where do spirits start walking. And my spiritual teachers, Jean and Eva Graff, God bless their hearts. Jean was the man, Eva was the woman. She sat me down and literally told me point blank, Sandy, you're not going to be working with herbs. You're not a healer through herbs. You work with spirit. And I said, what? And she allowed me to hear something about what she witnessed inside me that was really so deep within my emotions, that I had this spiritual experience that was beyond the realm of the earth. It was truly universal. And she said, but there's only two things that'll ever really challenge everybody. And I said, what's that? She goes, sex and money. And sex is number one.
Mm-hmm.
If you're ever going to find out who anybody is, we all have to go through money. We all have to go through sexuality.
Yeah. Yes.
And I had my women's group before you and I are talking. And one of the things that we were talking about is sexuality is really a normal phenomena that is denied by so many cultures if you discover that you're sexual. Why aren't we teaching sexuality? Why aren't we allowing sexuality not to be the big disgraceful secret?
Mm-hmm.
And to celebrate it in a way that this is your body, how do you respect it? These are these feelings, how do you respect it? If you're on blood, does anybody tell a child right away you can get pregnant? That a man's going to track you down?
Well, in my household, because you've known my household for almost 20 years now.
We're clocking some time.
We're clocking some time. I am, and I will tell you that I was chastised for talking to my children very plainly about the birds and the bees, and drugs for that matter.
Right.
And because I didn't want them to be ignorant.
Exactly.
Don't be ignorant.
Right.
And I remember telling one of the men that I worked with at that, I was having this conversation with my 9-year-old son and my 6-year-old daughter, and he looked at me and he said, "What, are you crazy? Why would you talk to them about those things?" And I said, "Why would you not talk to them about those things?"
Exactly.
They need to understand, relationship. And I'm not going to be willfully ignorant, and nor am I going to allow my children to be ignorant, because sometimes it is innocence and ignorance that catches us up in a place of, oh shit, what do I do now? Why didn't anybody... Yes.
I'm sorry. Your children were in the time zone when drugs were everywhere.
Yes. And depending on, the family dynamic, I remember having a conversation with Elise when she was a teenager, and she was having one of those moments. And
that only she could have.
That only she could have. And I said to her, if I need, to put you on birth control, you need to tell me.
Right.
And don't just think, oh God, I'm not telling you, you're, my mother, whatever. Exactly. And a few years later after that, she took someone that she went to high school with, she took her to the clinic in Grand Rapids to have an abortion. And her friend didn't know what to do, and Elise called me from the parking lot, and she was crying, right? And she said, "Mom, when I get home, I want to talk to you." And I said, "Okay, well, of course you can talk to me." So when she got home, later that evening. I asked about her friend, etc. And she said, Mom, what would you do if I told you that I was pregnant and I wanted to have the child and keep it? What would you do? Would you make me leave this house? And I looked at her and I said, no, I would not make you leave the house. And I understand that if that happened, I would be helping to raise my grandchild.
Right.
I understand that. And I would not ask you to leave. And so we had this amazing conversation. And I said to her, I understand that for some young women, they are told to leave because they've been shamed. And they don't feel there's another alternative. Just take care of it. You got yourself into this mess. You take care of it.
You made your bed. Now go lie in it.
Exactly. And I said, just because I'm, with my experience in life, it brings me to the place of I would help you raise that baby, but not everybody has that.
No.
That's reality.
Exactly. And that is where, excuse me, but what is it what's the line when the shame of the parent is more important than the safety of the child?
Yes.
The shame of the family is more important than the safety of the pregnant child or the child that is being debated over already as the sin, unworthy to be a valued being in the home that it's conceived in.
Yes.
Not all people that are pregnant are allowed to have their babies.
Right. And for a variety of reasons, they do turn their children over for adoption. And there are a million reasons why that happens.
Right.
No shame, no blame. I don't know the circumstances yet that my mother experienced. I don't know yet. There's nobody alive that can tell me. So I'm having to do my investigative work on my own, and that's okay. I will discover what I need to discover. It was interesting when I met my father's family, and my father had no idea I existed. And every one of my King cousins said to me, oh, had Granny King known that you were around, she would have raised you if your mama couldn't. No shame or blame to my mama, but kin is kin, right? And Granny King would have raised y'all and would have helped your daddy raise you. That isn't always the case.
No, it's not.
And this idea that everybody has an extended family or support system, that is false.
Women are kicked out of the house as teenagers, left to deal with because the parent or the stepfather or the stepmother will not tolerate the intrusion.
Yes.
The intrusion and be inconvenienced.
Yes.
You're the whore, you go deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at what point, my son is not responsible. My son wouldn't do that. Oh, no, we don't have to. He doesn't have, you're not going to ruin his life. He's going off to college.
Yes.
You can't ruin his life.
That's reality right there.
That's right.
That's reality. And, for me, and again, it goes back to my life experience, I believe sex was not on the radar for me in high school or anything. You and I talked about this. I was more concerned about my next set of, baseball cleats or my next softball mitt, or sports was my life. So that, that was that for me.
Or how to sing like Stevie Nicks.
How to sing like Stevie Nicks, doggone it. Getting to the next Minnesota Vikings game or Minnesota Twins game or North Stars game. That was my life. And I think it was also an understanding of my biological mother's journey at some point. But to think that, that our daughters are not having sex, that our children are not having, that is, come on, get with it, people.
It's
And
true.
you know what? When push comes to shove, and if your daughter comes to you and says, this is what happened, or if a woman finds herself in a situation where she's been having an affair with a man, that's real life.
Yes, it is.
That is real life.
Yeah. And just because some society or religion says it is not right to do, it's a sin. I hardly know anybody who hasn't sinned and just can't control their hormones or their heart or their excuse or their, excuse me, but the Catholic Church has raped children for thousands of years. And sex is primal. Sex is a sense of entitlement for most men, even for young men, with you asked for it. Look at you. Jodie Foster in the movie when she got raped, there she is, and then gangbanged. People are bullied into having sex, peer pressure into having sex. I didn't have sex until after high school, and, there were people in high school that I thought, they don't look the type. And I was blamed because I looked the type. I had a fist fight with somebody because they called my friend a whore, and it was like, she was the tightest virgin there was. She didn't have sex until she got married.
Right.
And it was like, you're calling her a whore?
Right.
You're going down.
Right.
It's like, so again, here I am defending someone's honor because that verbiage was so easily used to demean a woman.
Yes. And at the end of the day, I have never known anybody in my 59 years, I have not ever known a woman personally that has utilized abortion as their contraceptive. And I've never known a woman who has gone through the experience of abortion that was not forever changed. And I don't mean in a great way. I don't think from the women that I don't know anyone that has gone to have an abortion that was laissez-faire about it.
No.
That just went in there like they were getting their teeth cleaned.
No.
There is soul anguish. There is questioning. And
there's grief.
There's grief.
There's displaced emotion. A person having an abortion can leave their body.
Yes.
They can become disassociated.
Yes.
They can literally shut down so that they don't have to have the experience of dealing with it in that moment, but it will catch up with them.
Yes.
There is rage in women when they realize whoever isn't going to support this baby and come and be with me to have this baby. It's like, what? I just had that moment where I'm outraged with the mythology of all babies are wanted.
And that is a mythology. There are so many, I was listening to somebody who said today that there is a thought because there's now a shortage of available infants for adoption. There is a shortage in the United States. There are lots and lots of older kids in the system that are looking, hoping, wishing somebody would take them home. But there is a shortage in the United States of infants. And so there's a thought by some, I haven't really, thought too long and hard about it by myself, but there is a thought by some that is all of this being stirred up? Are all of these restrictions being put into place to help couples purchase babies? I mean, the adoption industry in the United States is for profit. It is a for-profit industry in the United States.
Does
People will,
everybody know that? Does everybody know
no,
that? Do the
no.
lobbyists know this? Do
Oh, yeah. It's big business. It's big business. People will go into a lifetime of debt to adopt a child, a baby. And not all of them end up in magnificent homes. And, years ago, I've always had, of course, an interest in the whole subject. There were countries that stopped allowing American couples to adopt their children because they were discovering that a lot of children were not finding their place in safe, loving homes. Some were finding themselves being trafficked. I watched a documentary years ago. Todd and I were in we were in Montgomery, Alabama. His daughter was in an NCAA diving final. And we went back to the hotel room, and there was a documentary on the sex trade in the United States and the trafficking of rehomed children. And that there were people on Facebook, and I have been researching a couple of the groups that are still on Facebook, that rehome children. And it goes something like this. I have a child. The child has a brilliant, bright smile. The child has white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, is quirky in this way, looking to rehome.
Shop here.
Shop here. And we all know that on the other side of the screen is not necessarily the Waltons going, look, Ma, we can bring another child into, our family here on Walton Mountain. No, what they were finding are sex traffickers on the other side of the screen. I watched this documentary. And Todd said, are you sure you want to watch this? And I said, I feel like I need to watch this.
Right.
And as I said to you the other day in, getting my stuff together for the attorney in Atlanta and for the Georgia adoption folks, reunited something or other, I ran across the sales receipts for me. I ran across two $25 receipts. And I get really feral and fierce, not for myself so much, but I know that here in the United States, it is still happening. And as you and I are speaking, there are children who are being rehomed with no oversight. And the home they go to isn't necessarily a home, but it's a place of pornography, of molestation, of atrocities. And I cannot imagine any woman giving their child up for adoption thinking, well, I'm going to give my child up so that it can be placed into sex trafficking. And I find myself even with Easton. I mean, I was with him this morning between clients. The equine vet had to come out and take a look at Heaven. She's got arthritis in her ankle, et cetera, et cetera. Then he was over here later. And at one point, he's just covered in dirt because he was helping me garden, and I bought him some new chalk for the sidewalk, and one of them was black. And there's this great photo I took of him. And at one point, I just sat there and I watched him in his own little bubble world. And thinking about what you and I are talking about tonight, I thought, what would the decision be if I knew that child was going to end up, even at the age of 2.5, a victim of rape?
Right.
That
happens to
happens.
little boys. It happens to little boys, not just little girls.
It happens. And so the subject is weighty when it comes to adoption, when it comes to abortion. Well, adoption is always the alternative, people say, but it's not always a good alternative.
It's not a myth.
It's not a myth.
It's not a fairy tale. It's not the only you can't sell me on At least, at least, at least.
Yes, Holly's saying, I've always been interested in adopting, but couldn't believe the costs. Exactly. It is exorbitant. I have a very dear friend in Grand Rapids who is a paralegal. And one day he and I, we were just having a conversation, and he looked at me and he said, in my entire legal career, I only helped with 2 adoption cases. And he looked at me and he said, I will never, ever, ever assist in another adoption. And I looked at him and I said, why? And he started to cry. This grown man started to cry. And he said, because it's nothing more than human trafficking.
Wow.
Even at the best of the best, it is trafficking human beings. And I just sat back and I said, oh my goodness, Tony. And he wept. He said it's a transaction, and it's not always a guaranteed good transaction. A lot of times it is. I'm not saying that it isn't. I know people who are adoptive parents who are spectacular, but they're also open to letting their children find out who they are and celebrate that.
And there are parents who said, stay home, we'll take care of the baby with you.
Exactly.
And it gives the relief to the mother that they aren't alone, they're not abandoned, they're not shamed, and the child is given love. It's wanted.
Yes.
It's wanted.
Right. So what we're talking about tonight is choice and making that choice, and it's never an easy choice, ever.
When you tell me, because I didn't know how big the adoption business was right now.
Yeah.
And it is also a very elite thing because the arrogance of a woman that doesn't want her body damaged.
Yes.
So she will have somebody else have her children.
Yes.
Or she will buy a child, or because there's wonderful children out there. I mean, one of the most beautiful movies I ever actually saw was Lion. Did you ever see Lion?
No.
With Nicole Kidman?
No.
Oh, Dana, you must. It's about a woman who could have children and decided to adopt because she knew that there were so many children in need of homes.
Yes.
And that she adopted 2 children from India.
Mm.
And the story about how these children got to be adoptable is exactly what you're talking about in what happened to one got lost and got on a train by mistake and got lost, and the horror that child went until somebody spared it and got it adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And then one was not wanted because it was so mentally challenged.
Yeah.
Please watch that movie.
I will watch that movie.
It's you looking for your roots and what it does to a person to need to find home.
Yes. To need to find home.
Mind-boggling.
Yes.
To know that you get haunted when the spirit of home calls.
Yes. And that's a good word for it. It is a haunting. And, when people ask me, so Dee, as an adopted person, what advice do you have for me as a woman who wants to adopt a child? And again, I will say to them, really ask yourself why.
Right.
Why? And if it is because you understand that there are children out there who are in need of a loving parent and are not necessarily going to display the same traits or coping mechanisms as you because they don't come from your bloodline.
Right.
They're going to be different. If you are willing to understand that and work with that, then good on you. That's fantastic. Right. I'll never forget my dad saying to me, the Sarge, he said to me, honey, the day that we picked you up, and that story has changed over time about where they actually picked me up. Was it Chattanooga? Was it Memphis? Yada, yada. He said the first woman that had you because she wanted a showpiece. And because you were nonverbal, you didn't speak, that's where the abuse came in. So every day you suffered abuse from this woman because you were not her showpiece. He said, but you came with what I call the Barbie doll trunk, because you literally had a trunk of clothes that were so expensive, and a stuffed dog, a stuffed animal. But he said, you had the fanciest clothes, and I certainly could never have afforded that. But the reason that she was so abusive with you is because you were not the showpiece she was hoping for.
Wow.
That still happens, Sandy. That's not just 1962.
No.
So the question is, why are you doing it? Is it to have a showpiece? Is it to feel more complete as a woman? Why? And you need to really examine that.
I mean, we're honest enough tonight to talk about the spectrum of those that want, those that need, those that desire,
those that can afford,
those that can afford, those that are finally ready and it's more convenient, those that want, and no matter what has to be included is the surprise of the uniqueness of the child that is received.
Yes.
Because it has its own story and it has a whole different package of DNA. And people are now shopping for that. Well, what's the history? What's the mental history? What's the, the medical history? And that if somebody's born without the right DNA,
mm-hmm.
they can be excluded because now they have the sophistication of proving that.
Yes.
Well, I don't want somebody with potential diabetes. You just kind of shook me to my core to really hear the potency of the industry of adoption.
It is an industry, and it is a multi-gazillion-dollar industry in the United States. Rehoming, on the other hand, is you have to jump through more hoops at the dog shelter, at the Humane Society, than you do at rehoming a child. Here's for instance, when I watched that documentary down in Montgomery, there was a woman who had adopted a child and it wasn't working out. So there on the Face group book, they agreed to meet at a shopping mall. And at the shopping mall, this woman brought her child, and this child was exchanged at a shopping mall.
For what?
For parents.
No. What was the barter? Just take it?
Yes. Oh, you'll take him? Super. I'll meet you in front of the J.C. Penney. I don't know if it was a J.C. Penney, but let's just say. And this child thought he was going shopping with his mom and ended up going home. Right? I feel horrible when somebody dumps their dog on the side of the road. It breaks my heart.
So is not the government looking on Facebook and
No.
seeing that this trafficking is happening?
It's individuals, because there's a huge movement right now called adoptee reform or adoption reformation. Because this has been so hush-hush here in the United States, it's just now breaking loose, and adoptees are speaking up.
So the underground is there for anything and everything.
You got it.
Including the innocent baby.
Including
or the suffering woman who's told you can't have an abortion so that we can be... Oh, fuck.
Because adoption, we've got great parents that are waiting to take your child. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a multi-bajillion-dollar industry in the United States. And sadly, there are a lot of folks who would like to have a child, to bring a child into their home, who cannot afford it. Good people who cannot afford.
It also lets me know, and I hate to say this, is that our Supreme Court has been bought.
Yeah. There is the thought out there about that exact thing, yes.
Bartered, bought, favored, bartered, bought.
Yes.
Comply.
Yes.
50 years this law has been there, and I know that there's a glitch in it, that something wasn't indoctrined or signed, sealed, and delivered, and it was always postponed, and I'm sorry that we didn't take care of that. And I know that dangling participle is out there. But 50 years, my adult life has had the incredible opportunity to know both sides of the coin. And I now know people that are starting their life that are on the opposite side of that coin, there where it has been granted to everyone before them, and now it will be stripped from them, and how what they were in the safety of, they're now endangered by.
Yeah. Well, you and I have talked about politics before. I don't normally talk about politics because of my foundation. I am a huge fan of Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
I love that woman's ferocity. I love her intelligence. And she's not afraid to speak up. And I was watching some things today. Talk about somebody who's feral and ferocious about this whole thing that's going on. And she was talking about the fact that, if this passes through, if this decision is handed down, what that does then is it turns it over to either Congress needs to step in, or the individual states will be right. And so here in the state of Michigan, our governor Gretchen Whitmer has already put into place some things that will help to keep abortion legal in the United States. But there are some things that need to also pass through our government. But she's already started, a couple of years ago, putting together the framework.
And I know that happened. It started down in Florida, I think. God bless Florida.
Yeah.
Where they decided as a state, and it was like, okay, each state then will take care of itself. And that's what's going on with Texas and this and that thing. And even in my women's group, we talked tonight about that as soon as Texas started saying you can't, huge corporations said, we will take someone who needs something and get them to where they can have it safely.
Right.
So they, and it kind of shook technically, and it is like a state by state. So I would assume how biblical a state is, or religious, or how their politics fall. That as a state, the state of mind may, and obviously is about to do that. I know that New Hampshire, it's 24 weeks. When I had my abortion, you had to know what you were going to do by 12.
Wow.
By 12, 8 weeks were like, that's when you know you're pregnant, and what are you going to do about it? And by 12 weeks, you had the chance to get your abortion or whatever it was in there. And to me, that was good, because you had to make the decision while the baby was still, I can't lie. I saw what a baby looked like at 8 weeks old on the cover of Life magazine, and I didn't realize it was so forward. So what I thought I knew and what I had to learn is something different.
Yeah.
You have to be very strong about this, and make it sacred. It's not a throwaway.
Right. I know a woman, a beautiful woman who she survived her mother's abortion.
Wow.
Yeah, you've met her. And she is disabled because in the process of the abortion, parts were taken, but she survived. And she and I have had conversations about what it was like for her to be a survivor of being aborted, and her mother's experience of, I came here to abort you, but you didn't die. You lived.
Right. And what a strong life that is. What does that say?
Right.
What's the karma of that? What's the spirituality of that? What's the journey of that? In my heart, each of my conceptions somehow knew they weren't going to make it through. And I didn't bond with them except for the one. I didn't have the maternal feeling to battle with that I was going or they weren't going, what I was going to do or what they weren't going to do. It was, we need to pass through this quickly. We need to be respectful quickly.
Yep. Hey, Gemini. Gemini is in the chat room, and she is saying, I didn't think they were making abortion illegal. Oh, I thought the federal government just decided that they weren't going to pay for it anymore. I could be mistaken, though.
I haven't heard enough news about it. I mean, so the other side of the coin is, and for me, is when do the men take the responsibility for where they put their dicks rather than just dick around with all the women and influence their lives?
That's a whole other show. It's a whole other show.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because they get away with it's a masochistic sexual relationship. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And, oh God, you just got fight.
There it is.
It's been really good talking to you.
Yeah. Pandora's box just like creaked open. So, what's really happening is that if this passes, if this opinion goes through with our highest court in the land, then it will be up to each and every state to decide whether or not abortion is legal in each and every state, and determine jail time for a woman who seeks abortion, jail time for somebody who performs it, all sorts of things. And it brings up the topic for us as women, now that we are in the Aquarian age, of wait a minute.
Exactly. Wait a minute. It was really shocking to have them take away, they gave gay rights to get married, they took it away, and then they gave it back again. And I've actually performed a wedding for a gay couple that said, they took it away, so when they brought it back, we're going to take it, get married, before they take it away again.
Yeah.
And it's that place of, what are they really taking away? They're taking away sanity. That's the best way I can say it. Anybody who doesn't want an abortion doesn't get one.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who has a relationship with something in their religion that says this is not so, it's not going to happen, it's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But for them to reach beyond that to people that have different beliefs, different lifestyles, different modalities of reality, for them to cast their net on, I will deem what you do, whether you believe the way I do or not. I will deem it necessary for you to be obedient to my belief. That is not freedom.
Exactly. And as Kimberly is stating, does this become like a house of cards? What's next?
Exactly. Pay attention, ladies.
Gay marriage, is that next?
It's back on the books, I think. They're looking at it.
That's what I'm saying. So at some point we all have to say, hold up.
Well, look at what's happening to the transgender. That now it's not just in Texas, they're going after the parents for grooming their children to change, rather than honoring their children with their reality.
Right.
I want to say this. Anybody's God who's only made two versions of human being is a very, very uncreative being.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is not God. That's there's no brilliance, there's no uniqueness, there's this or that. That's it. That's a limited God.
Right. Right. Well, I believe that, because we as women, I think, have a ferocity. Whether or not you're a mother, doesn't matter. There is something in our female feminine spirit that can become so ferocious and so feral when it comes to protecting innocent people.
That's right.
No matter any of that business, we as women tend to get really feral when it comes to wanting to protect, to shelter, to nurture, to be compassionate for the underdog, and in particular, the innocent. And yet, many have grown up in an age where what dad says goes. The man has the last word for a variety of reasons. And there's this breaking point in those generations. I think with my generation, I certainly have never subscribed to that. Your generation's a little bit different. You were starting to burn bras. We just took ours off.
Right.
Right?
And, but again, I say to you, the spectrum between 1965 and 1964 and 1966 is so different. And I've even talked to men that they weren't allowed to have sex with more than one girl because then they were bad boys or this, that, and the other thing. And in 66, it was like, line up.
Right.
You can have as much sex as you want and be on drugs or da. I mean, that 2-year period of the portal is so different. And we're at that portal again.
Well, we are. And I feel we as women, we have a very strong voice. We may not have ever been told that. Maybe we've never practiced utilizing our voice. And now's the time.
And there are women that are the new generation have learned to speak up.
Yes.
They aren't chastised verbally like we were.
Exactly. And we, as the elder women, this is our opportunity. If you've not ever spoken up, I'm kind of a loudmouth when it comes to this kind of a thing.
I wonder what I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
No, the fearlessness is the reality that it's still dangerous to speak your mind.
It is.
The fearlessness is also, if you don't, we're still dominated. I resent profoundly that the dominant energy is working and creeping and stalking and posing such threatening violence and cruelty and insanity.
Yes.
I am angry at that.
And so it's our time to speak up and to say something and become active with it.
I don't know the name of the woman that's in Michigan that stood up and said no.
Oh
God, she was the most
spot
brilliant.
on.
Her adrenaline was pristine. For her to stand up and say, "You used my name," the answer is no. The answer is no. The answer is no.
Yeah. She's a spectacular. Kimberly may know her name. I think she is representative more toward that side of the state. But I thought, oh my goodness, what a spectacular woman to stand up and say no.
Exactly. I'm on her side.
I'm done with this. I'm done with, the Marjorie Taylor Greene wannabes.
Exactly. It's like, oh my God, there's so much to say.
Mallory McConnell, or yes, you're right goes. About that, Holly. Yeah.
I found her and I thought finally someone is truly speaking up to the it.
Yes.
Of the insanity.
Yes.
And saying no. It wasn't political.
It was personal.
Was dignity. It was personal. It was integrity. It was no.
Yeah.
You can't lie about me and have me go, "Aw."
Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, my love.
Yeah, it's all about having conversation, and my experience and my thoughts about my life. It's different than yours. It doesn't mean that I don't love you. It doesn't mean that you don't love me. But at the end of the day, it's my decision to make the decisions I make. It's my right to be able to make my decisions. And it's your decision to make yours, and having respect for one another, because we don't know what's going on in somebody's life. We just
really
don't. We think we might know,
No,
but we don't.
We don't know what's going in somebody's heart or mind.
Yes, McMorrow. Yes, Kimberly,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
Sandy. Thanks for a great conversation, and thank you, ladies in the chat room.
Well, now I know why Todd's birthday took us to this week rather than last week. So thank you, Todd.
Yeah, there I was in Tennessee, and then making my way over to Alabama to clean up my mother's grave.
God bless.
Yeah, so that's what I was doing that week. How interesting then that we have this conversation tonight.
Okay.
Yes.
I love everybody, and God bless the babies, no matter where, how, or what they do and bring to us. They are a part of our vehicle of journey of life.
They are.
Thank you. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Dream well, everyone. Thank you, everyone in the chat room.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.